Trust the Whaling Consortium. Build to last. The Whaling Consortium. Builder of nations.
Alrighty, it is that time of day again. It is time for daily casts. We've got two great Jinteki cards to talk about today, and I have three wonderful guests to talk about these with. I'm going to have each of them introduce themselves, say when they started playing Netrunner, how they're involved in Netrunner these days, and then their favorite agenda that has rotated or is rotating with the release of Elevation. So, Holly, I'm going to start with you first. Would you mind introducing yourself to the stream and answering those other questions? Oh, hold on one sec. I forgot to. If you can go again now, the stream can actually hear you.
Fantastic. I'm Holly. I've been playing Netrunner with sort of intent since I think Ashes came out. These days I'm trying to play competitive when I get the chance, but I haven't really been grinding. and I joined QTM recently, so I'm super excited about that.
It's very
The
exciting.
agenda that I'm going to miss the most is probably Obokata Protocol, but they already banned it, so there's not much I can say.
Very good. All right. Tom, do you want to introduce or actually, I've got Theo next in the alphabetical order, but Discord's going to mess me up there. So, Theo, do you want to introduce yourself next for the stream?
Hi guys, I'm Theo. I've been playing Netrunner since mid San cycle. So that's 2040. I'm the current UK national champion. And I play with the process. And my favorite rotating agenda. By the way, Holly, bold choice with Overcast Protocol. I'm not sure you'll have too many fans in the chat, but good to stick by your beliefs. I think mine is probably Project Vitruvius. I think that all of the decisions you have to make when you have a Vitruvius counter are the some of the most interesting decisions you make in Netrunner. Do I pick up the Seamless Launch, or do I pick up a Jam, a Rashida, or a Maranagarm this term? And I'm really hoping that we get to see some good new 3/2s in every faction.
Great, and yeah, we'll have one to talk about today, so we'll see what that portends for the rest. And then Tom, last but most certainly not least, do you want to introduce yourself and give us a little bit of info about your Netrunner history?
Yeah, I'm Tom. I started playing, I think also mid Sansan, maybe start of Sansan, definitely around then. And I dropped off for quite a while and got back into it with Borealis in a big way. I am a player and a community organizer in Sydney, Australia, and I'm part of the team organizing the upcoming APAC Continentals, which is really, really exciting. And as Alex has said in the chat, I'm a part of the Oz Microbrewers testing team as well, which I don't know is probably less of a testing team and more of just a good fun time.
I feel like that's
I'm
what
gonna
all
get in trouble
testing
for that.
groups become eventually, right?
Yeah. And my favorite agenda that's rotating is Project Atlas for similar reasons as Theo said for Vitruvius. Except I think it's I don't know. I just love playing Atlas.
I mean, those are my two favorite agendas. I think that are rotating, with like Oaktown coming in as like a third place. But yeah, no, I like a lot of those agendas. I'm going to be honest, Holly. I'm not the biggest fan of Oboe, but it did have interesting gameplay at times. So, but with all of that said, we've got a couple new cards spoiled from the process, though. Unfortunately, well, I guess Theo, you couldn't make it for the recording, but you're able to make it for this, so you get to talk about these cards just the same, I guess. So we usually go in set number order. So the first card we'll talk about is Seraculture Expansion. This is a 3/2 in Jinteki. It is an agenda subtyped expansion. Dividends 1. Parenthetical text. When you score this agenda, place one agenda counter on it for each excess advancement counter. And then when your discard phase ends, you may remove one hosted agenda counter to place 2 advancement counters on one installed card. And you cannot score that card this turn. So Holly, as the one who chose a Jinteki agenda as your favorite Mist rotating agenda, I'd love to hear your thoughts first on Seraculture Expansion.
So I like Seraculture Expansion. I think it's exciting that Jinteki has a 3/2 that has text on it. For a little while, the only 3/2s the faction had really were kind of blank, or were, Yagi Uda has basically nothing, and then Longevity Serum is questionable in terms of utility in a game. But Seraculture says, hey, if you score me as a 4/2, you're obviously going to signal scoring like a 5/3 or a 4/2 by removing the counter placing the advancements. But it's not going to be the tempo hit. It's not going to be the value hit. I think also with the new Jinteki ID, sorry, blanking on the name.
PT Utani?
Yes. That to me says, hey, you want to jam some agendas, score them out, maybe play something, for tempo, install, continue jamming. It says, hey, I'm going to try to rush out behind something, and Seraculture feels like a great fit for that.
Theo, I guess maybe we'll. I'm kind of curious to hear your thoughts on this card as well.
Something I saw that Jai pointed out on their card notes is that now Jinteki has 7 3/2s, which is something important to know about this card because you can still play Project Agioda. It's an Ashes card that's not rotating, so you can kind of do that Wayland thing that Wayland's been able to do pre-rotation, where you can play 7 3/2s in your fast advanced deck. So that's maybe something interesting you can do. Jinteki's obviously got Moonpool. That's something that's worth thinking about. So it's worth thinking about this card just as a blank 3/2. But then you've also got this dividends ability where you get. I think one way you can think about this is it's a bit like having a Vitruvius counter that gives you a super seamless launch. Picking up seamless launch is one of the most powerful things you could do with Vitruvius. And this is a better seamless launch that doesn't cost a click. So you're kind of you're investing your 1 click and 1 credit of value, and you're getting 2 clicks and 2 credits of value back. So over advancing this is kind of a positive economic exchange. So there's kind of 2 ways you can use it. One is if you have your Jinteki Glacier deck and you have your super remote with a Anoetic Void and maybe a Managam Skunkworks and you're just and your Lacosta grid and you're shoveling agendas through it and trying to score out as fast as possible at the end of the game before the runner gets too many central accesses, and you're 100% sure that your remote is secure. This is a great first agenda, second agenda to score because you're going to have that extra counter to put on your first, to put on your next agenda. You're going to sort of save a click that you can then use to score out a turn earlier or have an extra click to install ice. However, you have to be really, really sure that your remote is going to hold to do this because you're spending your counter to put 2 advancements on a card. You can't do that if you think that there's any chance that your opponent could get in if they have a pinhole or a light the fire, and we are losing Ag and Fusion, so I'm a little bit unsure exactly how you're going to build those kind of decks going forward. So that's one of the open questions that I'm really excited to find out how we're going to do that this expansion. There's a second way you can use this card, which is as a kind of perhaps over advanced card. You can. I'm excited with PT Untain if you can do some kind of deck where you're just going to go install advance, and use your PT ability and just make people guess, is this an overwriter or a clearinghouse? And this is kind of an extra thing that you can chuck out with your mitosis, and if they don't run it, then now you have this mini Project Jumon that you can use to get things up to 4 or 5 with PT counters, which then suddenly makes it really, really difficult. You in those decks, you really want to put your opponent in a position where if they run 1 trap ever, they're going to lose. That said, those decks don't love running 2-point agendas that can just be stolen out of HQ or R&D. So yeah, it's kind of a card with a lot of contradictions. It's a kind of interesting card that will. I'm curious to see how it shakes out, how people resolve some of those lingering issues.
Yeah, Tom, I guess we talked a lot about it. I guess do you have any additional thoughts on the card, either mechanically or from an art? And then I have a little thing I'll throw in about this after you get a word in as well.
Mechanically, I think I agree with everything Theo just said, except I think I don't know. I'm not convinced that first mode, the sort of using it as a seamless mode, will be the more common one. I just don't. I don't see, especially in a world with like Hermes and like Light the Fire. There are just ways to sort of kind of deal with that a bit. I think it'll see more in that shell game mitosis traps. You know, is that clearinghouse versus cerebral question? I think that's where it'll see play more, and how good that'll be in the new meta. Who knows? The thing that I'm probably most excited about on this is the introduction of a new keyword, which, as a rules nerd, always excites me. The dividends keyword as a way to like codify that project ability.
Oh yeah, this is actually like a proper keyword rather than just like a denoted like, oh, this is a thing that we're going, like a nomenclature word. Like the parenthetical text. Technically, like parenthetical text is not rules text; it's reminder text. So I guess dividends is going to go into the CR as a new mechanic.
Yeah, and I think that was hinted at in the rules article a few like last week, that there would be a new keyword. So I've been keeping my eye out.
Do we think
I
there's going to be any cards with dividends 2 printed in this set?
And do we know, is dividends 2 place 2 agenda counters on it? Is that what do we know exactly how dividends works yet?
Well, I would assume so based on the when you score this agenda, place 1, and that's the only case that 1 is referenced in the dividends. So presumably that would be the like X to X relationship. So maybe it's possible. I could definitely see that being a case. I feel like that would have to be a pretty like that. It's interesting because it's like this effect. I think is like, you know, as we talk as Theo was talking about, like it's a relatively good economic effect where it's just like, oh, for a click and a credit, you're getting 2 clicks and 2 credits, which is like quite a bit. So I'm like, okay, if that's a dividends 1, like how weak would the dividends 2 have to be for me to be kind of excited about it? Which is maybe a tricky design space. But I'm not sure. Maybe I've got that wrong.
Yeah, and with the way that dividends is written, like this Project Beal wouldn't work, right? Like with dividends as a keyword, I think. It would have to be dividends 0.5.
Yes. It's also an interesting thing about dividends, and I don't think this is, unless there's something in the set we haven't seen yet, the interaction with Sansan is kind of interesting.
Oh, yes.
Let's see if I can get Sansan City Grid up. Yeah. So Sansan City Grid doesn't really work with Beal at all. But because dividends is about the excess advancement counters, it would actually, like 3 counters on a Seraculture in a Sansan would give you the dividends ability. Which is like an interesting like difference in how the card is structured. But the other thing that I should shout out is this is our first full glimpse of the new agenda frames. I'm trying to think of a card we can grab from the recent set. It's not the most recent set, but yeah, we have Salvo Testing, and it's like, oh yeah, there is just a lot more room for art. And I think what we've seen is a lot of corps are getting flavor through their agendas beyond just their like, in addition to their ID card. And so giving those pieces more art has, I think potentially looks quite good.
Somebody explained to me what the whole silkworm thing is. This piece of flavor kind of passed me by.
So I think it's that the new beanstalk is like made of like a artificial silkworm thread kind of thing.
It is a semi, or I believe it is inspired by the biological thread of the actual silkworm, and then Jinteki has modified it for, use in the new beanstalk.
I wonder if we'll get like a giant spider card that's just in the top of each of these towers. Or not spider, that's not what silkworms are, excuse me. But I don't know. Maybe Jinteki would just be like, oh yeah, we crossed a silkworm and a giant spider to make our super silk.
They do like the giant spiders.
Jeff,
Yeah.
could I get a science check on this one? How strong would this silk have to be in order to, as I understand it from the science of space elevators, it doesn't have to support its own weight from underneath. It's kind of hanging down from orbit. So it has to be strong enough to support its own weight, and that's why, like if you had a space elevator that was made out of steel, it would have to be about, the width of the Earth in order to support its own weight. But could you make one out of silk?
I mean, so look, realistically, I think probably not. But I know that like carbon nanotubes, right now we can't make them long enough or quite strong enough to do this kind of task. But in theory, they're roughly the right sort of material. And you could probably, sci-fi stretch it that like, oh, silk is a little bit, maybe they've modified the silk pattern to involve more of that, carbon nanotube style structure. And because I guess in theory that could be. I was just saying in theory that could be biologically made. I would be pretty surprised if it could. So I this is probably not the hardest sci-fi out there, but I think it's close enough to give it a pass. I think.
Right, Wayland made their space elevator out of carbon nanotubes, but we're Jinteki. We do things a little bit differently. And
Yeah,
Ikea.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and Ikea, yeah. Just one more thing on the art, and I'll be the one to bring the tone of the conversation down, or maybe not necessarily down, but there's been a lot of talk, I think, online as to what these towers resemble, and this card's not really doing that any favors, I think.
Yeah. I mean, there's only I think there is a problem with towers inherently having that shape, and then you stick a bulbous thing on the end, and it just doesn't help. And like maybe one day we won't all laugh about this, but apparently not through. It'll have to be at least after the spoiler season finishes before we stop.
Exactly, it's
giggling at
the
this.
seasons. We got to laugh about it at the moment.
Yeah. Though we do also see that this silk probably is what the runner on Clean Getaway was ziplining. I think
It's ziplining, yeah.
Yeah, we had hypothesized like, oh, maybe they brought their own grappling hook, but no, it does seem like the silk is just kind of constantly protruding from these towers. So, all right. Do we want to talk about the next card, or anyone have any final thoughts on Seraculture? Okay, let's go on to Impiricist. This is a 7 cost, 5 strength, Sentry AP Destroyer out of Jinteki for 3 influence. It has 3 subroutines and no other rules text. Draw 1 card. You may add 1 card from HQ to the top of R&D. Do 1 net damage. Give the runner 1 tag. Do 2 net damage. And then the flavor text, Jinteki's most experimental ice are often their most dangerous. The art is a lab coat tie wearing scientist with a person in an Erlenmeyer flask. And Theo, apparently you found out why he might be wearing sunglasses inside, so I'm curious to hear about that.
So we had a note from Dr. Bees, who is a Netrunner player in the UK, who did his PhD on UV light catalyzed transformations of DNA, which might be what the scientist is doing in this art. And he pointed out that your regular glasses can glow like this under UV.
Oh, very neat. I was thinking it was just an anime reference, but we'll give them the credit of
realistically, he's
UV.
an evil anime character.
Tom, do you want to go first on your thoughts on this ice?
Yeah. This is new and Nancy, right? Like that's the sort of the slot I see this taking up in Jinteki decks. It obviously doesn't have that extra rules text, as you pointed out, Jeff, which I think defangs it quite a bit from Anansi power levels. But I think we can all agree Nancy power levels were pretty high and unfair. But 3 subs, 5 strength, sentry. But and they're impactful subs as well. Like you don't really want to face check into this. So I think this one will see play.
And Holly, maybe
Yeah, 3 strength.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Theo.
Sorry, no. Yeah, if Holly, if you want to go.
No, you can take it away. I think I'm going to take it in a sort of a different direction. So
The 3 strength, 3 subs, 5 strength sentry is almost maybe better than it looks because 2 of the natural predators of Anansi are rotating, so there's going to be a lot less Orca around with kit rotating. I would have thought, so people are really going to have to pay 5 credits to break this with Carmen, or probably 6 credits to break this with Echelon, even once they're fully set up, because there's no more turbine, so there's going to be no more runners going through this. Even with Game Dragon, you're probably going to need to pay a bit more with your Echelon. So you're never going to have that horrible trade where you had to raise your Anansi for 8 and then they would go through it for 3. So I think big sentries and big code gates are maybe going to be a little bit more important in this kind of future world. I'll say 2 more quick things on the play side. So one is that this obviously has a weakness compared to Anansi, that it doesn't have the extra text, so that does make it more vulnerable against Botulus and Boomerang, which I think are, and Banhar, and I think those 3 effects are going to be maybe even more important going forward, because there are fewer ways to, breaking ice is getting harder. We're having a smaller card pool with worse icebreakers, and at the same time we're losing some of the best ice against these effects, like Anansi. I was going to say Archer, but we are getting pseudo Archer reprint. And one other point that I was going to ask, how relevant is the tag on this card? How annoying is it going to have to be to remove the tags?
I guess it depends a little bit, like how many Jinteki decks are going to be running Mindscapings, because like we're seeing more tags show up on Jinteki Ice. Like we've got both Empiricist and Cloud Eater, and like maybe that will shift people towards, or shift Jinteki players towards making sure there's some amount of tag punishment in their faction. But it does. I think that is an interesting, and like I don't even know what the answer to that is, especially because like we've lost daily cast, so runner's econ is less resource based than it was pre-rotation, because I don't feel like we've seen a resource that goes in every deck the way the daily cast does. So I wonder like if you might just float the tag against Jinteki sometimes, just be like, no, you don't have it, because like it is like, even though Mindscaping is a card that can go in a lot of decks, I don't know that you like hold it for the runner floating 3 tags or something.
I do like the shout out in chat that the face check on this is snare plus draw a card, add a card to from HQ to R&D, which is which may be where the tag comes from.
That's a good point.
I'm going to sort of dovetail on some of what was being said about Botulus and Banhar on this and Boomerang too. One of the strengths of Anansi was that your opponent had to respect it. They couldn't just sort of slam down, their free breakers. They couldn't just, use their cheats to get past the big spider. And that put a dampening effect on the runner's ability to have early aggression. You had 8 credits. And I'm seeing this now, not having that text, if you put a boomerang on it, like who cares? Corp draws one, then puts one back. Like you're fine with that. That's an excellent trade for 7 credits. Once it's face up on the field, it's doing some more stuff, but it feels like the early game face check is so much weaker. And seeing Impiricist and seeing Microweb is comparing it to something like a Nancy or DNA tracker back in the day with Microweb. The Jinteki face check on ice is much worse from a port perspective.
Yeah, Anansi rotating is really going to change how it feels to play against Jinteki, because it's not just that this ice is more vulnerable to Boomerang and to Banha, it's also that it means every other ice is more vulnerable as well. They can blind Boomerang and do for HQ, or transfer of wealth HQ, knowing that if you res this, it's going to be fine, whereas they don't have to fear the way that they would have to fear Anansi, and you just couldn't install a boomerang on an unresed ice against Jinteki before, and now you can. So that's an important thing that you're going to have to deal with. I have one. Sorry.
You go ahead.
I was going to say there was one question which is hovering over this card for me, which is it's easy to just get used to looking at these big pieces of Jinteki ice and being like, oh, this is amazing. But Jinteki Glacier is in a bit of an awkward position with Ag Infusion rotating. I think a lot of the strategies that we're used to using won't make sense anymore. We're used to being able to have this Ironclad remote and being immune to pinhole and being able to play all this big ice and having this outlet that you can crash your ice if you've got too many big ice and not enough credits. And I'm looking at a lot. Yeah, basically Jinteki is losing all of its best late game scoring strategies. You're losing the kind of Regenesis punitive decks. You're losing Ag Infusion for the super hyper glacier decks. So I'm curious if you guys have any thoughts on what kind of decks, and of course you're losing PE as well, which was a deck that would have liked to play this. So yeah, what can you do for your super slow? And you're losing bacterial programming as well, which is important to note. What can you do with super slow Jinteki Glacier?
Yeah, I think that Jinteki Glacier as it exists now just isn't going to work unless, however many remaining Jinteki cards we have left are like, if the runner decided to run a server with 3 ice, deal 8 net damage, they need something truly crazy in order to generate this threat, because the way that you would score as Jinteki isn't necessarily with these hard ETRs, it's with these ice that you can't go through twice. Or if you go through once, you're going to be in a bad enough situation economically that you'll get killed on the backswing from something like punitive. And so with PT, I think that's sort of signaling the Jinteki that is going to be strong. In my mind, is these tempo-based, hey, I'm gonna rush out behind a Tatu, or I'm gonna, just try to get through this game as quickly as possible before you have a chance to meaningfully contest like a Sai Santan with a Tatu Bola behind it.
Yeah, it does seem like maybe like that slow style Glacier, like it would need a card. It's like another card we haven't mentioned, but like was a popular. Was Biovault, and like that's also rotating, and so where Jinteki Glacier has lost pretty much all of the like between that Nisei Mark II and Ag Infusion and Border Control, like those I all felt were like here's how you make Jinteki Glacier work. You like drag them through your big expensive net damage ice, but then you're like, all right, I'll end the run, and you can't tank that net damage again. And they're kind of missing an ability to do that, at least with the cards we've seen so far. And so the faction is going to have to look a little different in terms of how it tries to win games. I feel like.
I do think. Oh, you go, Ollie.
To be a little less doomer, I do think that the fact that Jinteki has one of the only sort of stable economic engines that's remaining post Rashida, with Charlotte Lacosta as a way to sit on a server and just generate a huge amount of value each turn the game goes on. That sort of does make me interested in trying to make something work, and maybe like Dan B is saying, maybe Atea is the future. Maybe we're, going to be doing some, weird instant speed installs and, cooking our agendas and all that kind of thing. But from a what do you do with the money that, Charlotte has given you, that's the big question mark.
Yeah, and like maybe
I was.
Oh, go ahead, Tom. Sorry.
I was just going to say that I'm with Dan B in the chat as a bit of an Atea Glacier believer. I think there is, I think that's where that Ag Infusion Glacier sort of archetype is going to move to, potentially in the new meta, the post rotation meta. I think there's a lot of value there, and I think something can be worked, but it's going to look very different. But I think that deck wants Empiricist.
Mm. Yeah, I do think if you're going to play Atea, Mitra also looks a little bit interesting, where like if the runner runs too late in the turn, you can kind of, fake them out and juke an agenda into the other remote that they're not running, though that might be a little bit tricky to line up in practice. Yeah, no, I think Jinteki is going to have to look interesting, because I do think this is a big callback, but Panic Pilana kind of migrated into Glacier Ag Infusion. And I think we'll have to see what the next style of this Jinteki with a single, or I guess maybe in the case of Atea, double remote server kind of mid to late game kind of plan ends up looking like. So yeah. Any
Okay,
final...
I have one more thing to say on this card, which is Anansi it still exists, it's still playable in a turn, it's not dead. Anansi has this property where you can put it on R&D, and then if they face check it, it means that they it firing makes R&D safe, because you can rearrange top cards of R&D. And Empiricist has the same property where you can draw a card and put a non-agenda on top of R&D, so that in addition to having taken 3 net damage and a tag, the runner has wasted their run. They didn't manage to steal anything.
And they run into your snare blueprint.
Oh, and you can stack a snare. Yeah, you're gonna have to. Well, Jeff, is there a snare reprint?
Who could say? I don't. Yeah, we'll have to see, I guess. There's I think an asset available in Jinteki, but I'm not sure about the other slots.
So the point that I was making was just that Anansi can make your R&D safe, and so can this, but this can also make your HQ safe. And Anansi on HQ is sometimes a bit weird because they could just face check it. Whereas this can actually hide the agenda that's in HQ on top of R&D, if your R&D is safe. And so you're going to have this mind game where if your opponent face checks this, and let's say you don't have an ISO on R&D, you can still choose to hide an agenda on R&D, thinking that maybe they won't run it, or maybe they'll have to check the top of R&D just in case you hid an agenda there, but actually you didn't. So there's an interesting mind game going on there.
Holly, as the person who's I've seen play the most Jinteki in this crowd, how do you rank this compared to Vampire Nos? Do they fill different roles? Do they fill the same role and one's better than the other? Or is, do you feel like the situation is a little more complicated than a simple what A is greater than B kind of thing?
I think they're filling sort of different roles, right? In Jinteki, one of the things that you really need is you need to diversify. You need to make them have each kind of breaker. And I'd compare Vampy more to Mycoweb. I'm pretty low on Mycoweb because when I look at that card, I see a Vampy that costs one more credit, but the subs don't always fire the right way. They require other res dice in order to do the thing I want. Whereas Impiricist seems more like a grown-up Saisentan. This is the ice that you're putting in your deck to punish people who are running low strength sentry breakers. To say, hey, your echelon might get through, these drafters really easily, but you are going to pay here. I'm going to tax out your revolver. I'm going to, cost you $4 and 3 bullets. The math on this lines up well, or the numbers on this line up well versus the icebreakers that we've seen going forward. And I don't think there's another big sentry that you're really excited about because you can't run more than, one Cloud Eater these days.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
that makes
sentries are
sense.
super scary. Jeff, as the resident Shaper enjoyer, how are you breaking sentries with Shaper after rotation?
I think you're just begging NSG to unrotate Ika. I don't know. I think it's very tricky because like it does kind of feel like it's echelon end of list, right? Like there could be another one, but it's like you have echelon. I don't think that like Living Mural is a card, as much as I would love it to be one. Threat 4 is a pretty long way into the game, and even here, like you'd still have to boost anyway. And then like chat's calling out the other answer as Revolver, and I think like this ice is actually pretty well situated against Revolver, where you're still spending 4 and half of the bullets. So like it's not that difficult for me to imagine a world where like you can drag woe forbid a single Sisyphus protocol is scored. Did I misspell Sisyphus? I did. Suddenly like a single Empiricist eats up like what is that, 8 credits and your entire gun on a single piece of ice. Like I think that could be an angle of attack for Jinteki decks looking to go after Shaper. And like you might even in Shaper consider splashing Carmen in some cases, which I think is kind of says how dire the killer situation is in Shaper at the moment. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's gonna be interesting to figure out what Shaper's breaker suite is gonna look like. But I think even Anarch has this interesting question too, where this is a pretty hard card to break for Anarch in faction.
Yeah, I wonder if we're going to see Anarchs doing the same thing that that some Hashiko decks were doing kind of around Worlds 2023, where you're playing Unity and Carmen.
Playing one
because
of
you
each.
don't have the turbo anymore now. And you can play. I think Jinteki Glacier is going to be in a good spot if people are planning to use Leech as their turbine substitute, because you're not going to get that many cheap central runs to get the Leech counters. And so if that's how you were planning to get through this with Echelon, then you're going to be really upset, because paying 6 over and over for the 7 cost res ice is not going to be a good trade in the long run.
Yeah, I do. So when you were talking about sort of what does Anarch do, and I think Anarch does Banhar, does Botulus, does Crew Charm. Like I think the Anarch matchup is one where the ways that this is not a Nancy with the spoiler with the text that if you don't break it the fair way you take damage. That's the matchup where it's going to hurt the most. I'm also far more willing to run through this as an Anarch than I was in Nancy. Anansi gave the corp so much control over what was on R&D, and also, shot you for 4. Whereas this is like, oh, okay, it's 3 damage and it's a tag. It's like, oh, okay, I hit a snare and they, did a little manipulation. So like, fairly beating this card is hard, but I think there's a lot of unfair runner cards.
Yeah, that's actually maybe the right, like, probably the way Shaper beats this is by splashing Botulus or Physarum.
Yeah,
is probably the real
I think
answer,
so.
right?
Oh yeah, Physarum. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
another
Physarum
card
on
you
your
can-
Madani, and then you can, whenever you need it.
Yeah, I mean, that would be interesting because I feel like Physarum saw no play outside of Arasana, and I personally think that Arasana's losing quite a bit to rotation, but maybe that this sort of kickflip stuff is enough to keep her kind of in contention. So that'll be interesting to see.
Question about the you can think of Anarch as trying to solve this problem of we have Botulus and Banha and Brew Charm and Audrey and like the best kind of unreliable icebreakers in the game, and then you're trying to construct the best shell around this where you can find some way to make the fact that you can't always be able to run R&D every turn for the rest of the game, and try to mitigate that weakness. And Omakua is rotating, which is what the Crew Charm decks were using mostly to have like a backup breaker solution. So I'm kind of curious how Anarch is going to solve that problem of what's the like least slots that you can devote to ice breaking in addition to your Botulus, your Banhar, and your Crew Charm.
Yeah, I pulled up Numb earlier, and I don't think this card makes you want to run Numb on its own, but technically it is a solution, right? Just pay 6 on your 4-cost killer. That also is really sad as soon as someone reses a cheap, when someone reses a Sizenton against you, you're pretty sad with Numb as well. So
I'll push back on the 4 with Numb. I think Numb is a 4 break here. I'm letting that first subroutine fire for 2 credits all the day, every day, all the time.
Yeah.
Are you running HQ or are you running R&D?
I mean, I don't run R&D, so.
Yeah, if you're running R&D as Anarch, you're presumably clicking a Stargate. Otherwise, what are you doing?
You just run the remote every turn and wait for the corp to deck out.
Yeah, exactly.
Is the answer for Shaper chromatophores? And then just break it more efficiently with a different breaker?
I mean, I'm a bit of a chromatophores hater, but maybe this is the solution. It's chromatophores and Palangi and a game dragon something or other. But
absolute silence on Jeopardy as people try to think of question to which chromatophores is the answer.
Unless your name's Cephalopod Wizard, right?
Yeah. Well, it was funny. It was like, well, I'm not really a Shaper player, so I don't know where this is going in my decks.
Yeah.
I guess it's technically splashable, but yeah. Actually, I think I don't know if we even mentioned Begamot chromatophores, but that could be a fun deck. But I think we're getting well off topic on Empiricist and Jateki. But I also get a sense that we've kind of squeezed all the juice out of this lemon, so to speak. So I guess we might finish up with a I think we're at past half the cards spoiled. So I might be curious as we wrap up to just kind of have each of you talk about maybe one of the cards you're most excited to try putting in a deck first. And because I'm just springing this on all of you, I'll let whoever wants to go first go ahead.
I can jump in. It's not a card that's going in a deck, but I am incredibly interested in Gamlang Arena or Nebula Talon, both from a ID perspective and from a flavor perspective. I think it's such a cool mix of like, oh, this is a new thing that we haven't seen NBN do, like the idea of being, you know, talent management to the stars, VTuber, all of this sort of parasocial, media manipulation of the future is so cool from a flavor perspective. And the ID also seems really strong. And there's a lot of ways that you can, fast advance out of 3-2. And there's no more clot. So I can definitely anticipate, putting some ice on HQ and R&D and, absolutely just jamming out with either a fast advance or a credit every turn if they want to run through my free to play.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to score our remastered edition with Biotic Labor and just shovel the win out of hand.
Nice. Tom, any idea of a card you're excited to put first when Elevation arrives on our doorsteps?
Yeah, really excited for just Criminal in general. I think both Criminal IDs look like a lot of fun, and I think they're also, I don't know, I think there's something really elegant about both Baz and Muslia T as core set identities. And I think Zaya fits into that mold as well. I just really, really like them. And seeing the reprints of the near prints of Dirty Laundry and Account Siphon is getting me excited as well. So I think Crim is definitely what I'm most excited for, and I'm really excited to see more Crim cards. I think that's gonna be cool.
Yeah, I think Crim has the most cards. Like, those are actually all 4 cards we've seen from Crim so far.
Yeah, exactly.
So it does feel like they're a faction where it's like, oh, I'm excited to see what they're getting next, because all of these feel like bangers. And so there's
100%.
a lot of potential there. All right, Theo, want to throw it over to you for closing thoughts on this?
The card that I'm most excited for, I'm a HB fast spam fully operational enjoyer, so I'm very excited for poetry and auto campaign. Auto campaign is one of the I'm prepared to nail my flag to the mast and say that auto campaign seems like one of the strongest cards, probably the strongest card we've seen in this set so far. It's like a Holy Man level card. But I'll actually say that one of the most interesting cards I'm most interested to see, I'm most uncertain whether or not it's going to be good, is Touch Ups, the new NBN card. That's kind of a Salem's Hospitality staple to a shipment from Sansan. And whether you can kind of do kill combos with this, where you're using it as your extra copies of End of the Line in a deck that is hoping the runner will float tags, or you can do some kind of kill combo with Orbital Superiority in tomorrow's headline, or you can maybe even splash it or do kind of reg things with it, where you're actually just using it to advance your agenda and you're shuffling your opponent's programs away. I think it's one of the cards where I'm most uncertain whether it's going to be like day one, oh my god, this is so much better than it looks, or actually this is unplayable. How do we spend an hour talking about this? What were we thinking?
Yeah, it is one of those cards where it's like it's like no deck ran those 2 effects together, but they also weren't stapled together on the card, so it's very difficult to evaluate where it's going to land, which I think is kind of interesting. All right, well, thank you to all 3 of you for coming on. This has been a really fun conversation, and it really flew by, so thank you. And thanks to everyone for tuning in. Tomorrow we will have another day of daily casts, and we'll be approaching the end pretty quickly. It's just 3 more days of daily casts, They're probably going to be pretty loaded, given that we're looking at 3 to 4 spoilers a day. But I think it's been a really exciting set to look at so far, and I'm looking to see kind of how we get how everything gets filled out. So yeah, thank you to the 3 of you. Thanks to everyone tuning in, and we'll see you all tomorrow. Actually, no, we're not. I'm sorry. I've screwed this up.
And now, broadcasting live from our near-Earth hub studio, we bring you this NBN special report.